Upon seeing his figure lying on the ground, she was shocked for a moment, then immediately flew down to his side. After getting close to him, she kept on shouting master in the hopes Giju would come back to his senses. Brunhard also cried for his master not to die, while Lu called Elle a wench and saying how dare she come here but before he could finish yelled out loud in pain along with Brunhard. Elle gripped her heart in pain and said the link. As consciousness started to fade away from Giju, he felt something faint, thinking to himself if this could be the afterlife. What happened to everyone, he wondered. Like Lu said, could they have all died with him? Because of him? If he knew this was going to happen, he would have gone to see his family's faces. He's worried about them, but he's sure Taeshik would take care of them in his place. Will Su Young be alright as well? She may be in a predicament now that the one she declared her disciple is dead. He still hadn't managed to pay her back for the 3 elixirs yet. Sikwoo, Seonpil and Donghee, he wanted to be a more helpful ally to them. He still had unfinished business with Iron Shield, and Lee Seonho, who may become his enemy, and of course the Marquis of Discord Andres, as well as the demon Elle was sealing. There was still too many threats that might harm his family. He thought he wouldn't want anything else after curing his mother's illness. He didn't think he had this many attachments left. If someone like him disappears, then suddenly he opened his eyes. He found himself seated on a huge stone throne. Suddenly overhead something flew by, and before him an army of monsters was walking forwards towards a horizon with a setting sun. He got up from his seat and shouted out loud, "What in the world?" Dragons filled the sky and monsters he had never seen before was in front of him. Countless enormous soldiers were walking towards the angels who were standing against them. He turned around and wondered why was he sitting on a throne. This feels too realistic to be a dream, but his thoughts were interrupted by Lu shouting loudly for him to turn back. Giju momentarily blacks out and the next moment he opens his eyes, he finds himself in a different place. His head is lying on the lovely lap of Elle, while she greets him. She smiles down at him lovingly and calls him master, while Giju is still trying to make sense of where he is. He sits up and asks where is this place. Looking around at the serene scenery before him, he asks her is this heaven? Elle tells him not yet, it's still the floor of the trial. Giju grabbing his head remarks, he thought so, there's no way he could go to heaven. But hell's a different story. But how was he not dead? Then thinking about it thought maybe it was the ability Elle absorbed from Kallian. As the ruler of holy swords, the Kallian ability allowed it to block an attack leading to instant death once. He turns back towards Elle, and tells her that he managed to survive thanks to her. He thought he almost died while fighting against her, but he froze. Elle could only look at him with expression of regret, and asked him to walk for a bit. While walking, Elle asked Giju why he didn't cut her down when he had the chance. Since she was a traitor who dared to brandish a sword against her master. And Giju replied that he knew she didn't mean to. He could tell things like that. Elle was beside herself trying to tell Giju even if she didn't, but Giju cut her off saying that he knew, she must have foreseen that this might happen. But he would have preferred that she told him beforehand, but for her defense she wanted to actually persuade him against entering the 40th floor's trial, and settled for his present situation. But in the end, she couldn't dare stop her master, since he must climb the tower after all. Giju told her not to feel guilty, since everything worked out alright in the end, so it's all good. He asked her where are the other egos, and Elle replied that because this is a separate space, the other egos are somewhere else at the moment. Giju asked her if her memories have come back, to which she replied that somewhat but they're still hazy at best. She was originally a being created to follow the will of the One. She was in much confusion due to the matter of serving a new master. Giju wondered to himself who this the One could be. Her memories of the One must have become hazy after her mind was clear of its confusion, since she fully decided to serve Giju after this event. She did however remember one thing, and it's that holy swords are angels who have downgraded themselves of their own accord by dedicating their mind and body. And that she was the very first holy sword, the ruler of holy swords. All holy swords have been made with her permission and will. Then she suddenly apologized and told him it was almost time, which made Giju very puzzled. She thanked him for everything, granting her a second life, and treasuring her and always staying by her side. She continued to say that she wanted to talk about so much more with him, but she was afraid this is as far as she can go. Giju asked if this was a joke, was she kidding him? But as Elle's body started to break apart she said, that he was greater being than even he himself knew. Even Lu and herself, who have lived for a very long time, could not define him. Giju asked her to wait. Why was she being like this? She told him to cut down everyone who stands in the way of him climbing the tower, whether they be angels, demons, humans, or lords of the tower, cut them all down. Giju in a panic shouted loudly for L. She gave him a very gentle smile as she started to fade away and said, "Become the master of the tower." She was sure he could do it. In the next moment, he sat up suddenly back in reality, and gripped his aching heart. Brunhart was glad his master was up, while Giju was having a coughing fit, and Lu told him that he was so damn slow. Giju started to calm himself, and said he was sorry for worrying them. Then his eyes caught sight of something nearby. It was L's rustic sword form that was stabbing the ground nearby. Meanwhile, inside the Player Association Tower, Yubin was waving goodbye to her guild members after their training session. A guild member noticed Yubin stopping to stare at her phone, so she asked her if she was not going home as well, since Yubin was headed towards the portal zone. She answered that she was gonna be waiting for someone, to which the guild members in chorus asked if it was a man, which made Yubin blush red like an apple, and she stuttered that it's nothing like that. Thinking to herself, no, not completely, but, as she stared at the text messages shared between herself and Giju. Since he said it wouldn't take that long to clear the 40th floor trial, but he probably won't be coming out by today, right? Still, she decided to wait a little bit longer just in case. As her guild members were leaving the building, they noticed a figure walking in. They couldn't believe they were able to see him in person for the first time, Lee Xianho. Meanwhile, back at the 40th floor trail, Giju was kneeling before L, calling her name, but got no response. The system notification informed him that he had passed the trial, and was distributing rewards. Inside the chest was a white feather called L's token. He looked at this with shock, and felt that his link to L was broken. He clenched his teeth in anger, and grabbing his head screamed in rage. Overtaken by emotions, he smashed at the ground with his fists. Brunhart and Lu were both asking him what he was doing, but ignoring their cries, he kept on smashing his fists. He slammed his fist so hard into the ground that it started to shatter. From the force of the blow, even the bones on his fingers started to fracture. Lu desperately shouted for his master to stop. After one more blow, Giju came to a stop and blood started to drop down his fist. He put his head down and started to cry in grief. Brunhart told his master not to cry, while Lu told him to get a hold of himself. He shouldn't be crying like this over a traitoress, but before he could finish, Giju cut him off and told him to shut up. While Lu remained silent, Giju came back to his senses and quickly apologized, and said he shouldn't be getting mad at him, and asked just to stay quiet for a little bit. After some time had passed, he started to exit the floor through the portal to the tower's 40th floor checkpoint. As soon as he stepped out, Lu warned his master to be careful, telling him there is a barrier. Giju looked around and he couldn't find anyone near the checkpoint. Lee Xianho appeared before him, and said that he came here just in case, but it looks like it was a wasted trip. From the state that Giju was in, the ruler of holy swords must be, but at that moment, recognizing who was before him, Giju drew his weapon and got in a pose ready to fight. Lee Xianho told him to relax, since he made a promise not to harm him. Turning around, started to leave, saying he only came here merely to confirm something, but all he managed to confirm was his unsightly state. Commenting he couldn't believe that Giju was incapable of even treasuring a single sword. This statement completely enraged Giju. He started to imbue the black sword with death, while his egos tried to calm him down. Lu started to tell him not to do anything stupid, but not heeding their words, Giju launched an attack and struck at Lee Xianho's retreating back. However, to Giju's surprise, he was able to spot his most powerful attack with just his fingers. Then, flicking his fingers, Lee Xianho was able to force Giju back away from him. After Giju fell on his butt, Lee Xianho reminded him that he made a promise not to lay a hand on him for 1 year, but he didn't make that condition reciprocal because he didn't consider Giju a threat to him. But to think that the one who calls himself her master is in such a state, what an eyesore. A dejected Giju looked at the ground in frustration. Lee Xianho continued to say that the tower does not do anything meaningless, that's the only thing he can tell him, while walking away from Giju. Giju got to his feet and cursed loudly in frustration. As the rain started to fall down, Yubin had been waiting all day at the portal entrance. She guessed that it was a bit of a stretch for him to clear it on the same day. It's getting late, so she was planning on getting something to eat and head home. While looking at her phone, she didn't mind eating alone. Just then some commotion caught her attention. She decided to go see what it was all about. Then noticed Giju standing with blood stain on his chest, and people around were wondering if he was injured or if they needed to call the authorities. Yubin started to rush towards him calling his name, and as she got close to him, she asked what happened, and a dazed and barely conscious Giju recognized her and said her name, before falling unconscious in front of her. Yubin was shocked as Giju fell into her arms. After blacking out, he felt his head feel heavy, and he wondered what happened to him after he left the tower. He felt like he met someone, but as his eyes started to open, the first words to come out was Yubin. Unfortunately, it was Sunghoon who was standing in the room. After recognizing who it was, Giju sat up from bed. Brunhart greeted his master, and said he was glad to see him awake. Giju, still not fully understanding the current situation, asked where he was, and Sunghoon informed him that he was at his home. He then said Giju was probably gonna ask anyways, so to keep it short, he found Giju in Shin Yubin's arms on the street, and since he was tailing him, took over for her. Then brought him here after getting the association doctors to diagnose him. By the way, he was the one to take off his clothes and gloves. Giju mindlessly thanked him, but wondered to himself in her arms. Then our hero asked that aside, he was tailing him. And Sunghoon replied of course, since there's no way he could stand idly by as their VIP left the association in that state. Yubin went back after nursing him for quite a while, so give her a call later. Then stretching his arms, he asked Giju if he would like some tea or maybe a meal. Giju replied a meal and then asked if he had any alcohol as well. After drinking several cans of beer, Giju asked Sunghoon if he wasn't curious about what happened, since he hasn't asked anything about it at all. Sunghoon replied that he was sure Giju would tell him when he felt like talking about it. Besides, whatever happened, he probably needed time to get himself sorted out, and he can't get in the way of that. Giju thanked him, then commented that his house was pretty big, and asked if he lived alone. Sunghoon smiled happily and replied yes, he was still single, and Giju said not that, do you live alone? Sunghoon told him that his mother is hospitalized, and said it's a boring story about a sickly mother and a poor single mother household. He managed to get lucky and became a player after all his struggles, but the disease had already advanced too far and money couldn't cure it, or something like that. Giju commented that it's pretty similar to his life, then wondered how Sunghoon felt back then, when he obtained the elixir. After thinking about things, he got up and opened the window to get some fresh air. When his mother was in critical condition, he thought he was the most unfortunate person in the world. It felt like he was out of his mind, as if he was shouldering all the sadness in the world. He felt the same way now. As Sikwu, Seonpil, and Donghi, who lost many of their comrades in the battle against the Iron Guild, he's sure they were just as sad as him and held back their tears. He hasn't grown at all since back then, as he gripped the handrail of the balcony. Brunhart showed concern for his master, and Giju told him he was okay, he was just sorting out his feeling a little. Remembering back to her comment for him to climb the tower. He said to himself that if he was not gonna get used to losing things, he'll just have to become strong enough not to lose anymore, that's the only way. Closing his eyes and making a conviction, he told Lu that there was something he wanted to ask. When he got no response, he called Lu's name again. Then asked Lu why he wasn't saying anything, but Lu replied he couldn't answer since he was told to shut up. Giju asked if he was still upset about that, he said he was sorry. Lu asked why does the law exist if apologizing solves everything, then Giju commented that he was speaking fine when they were facing Lee Seonho, and Lu replied that was an emergency. So what did he want to ask? Giju asked if there was a possibility of reviving L. Then Lu replied that it took him long enough to ask, and called his master a moron. Lu was the ruler of demonic swords, and L was the ruler of the holy swords. Giju didn't think it's a coincidence at all that he became the master of two egos who are complete opposites. What's important is that their properties are completely symmetrical. Just as Lu's Bobi was the reward from the 30th floor's trial, and it was used later on in his evolution, then L's token that he got as the rewards from the 40th floor's trial was probably an item used for her evolution. As Lee Seohan said, the tower does not do anything meaningless. From that statement, L's death on a floor meant for her evolution is contradictory. The elder, while looking at L, said it's possible. Then a shocked and excited Giju shouted really, and the elder replied that the experience obtained from observing the Holy Sword 9, and in terms of appearance, he was sure he would have no issues. But like he said, that would purely be in terms of appearance, since it was impossible for him to bring back her ego. Giju told him that was fine, since he would do that part. Then the elder asked if he could work inside his gate, since the mana density is very high in there, so it would be a great help to his work. Saying it was not a problem, Giju opened the gateway. He told the Lich Heart to make sure the elder has everything he needs. If he needs something, have the skeletons get it for him, and the Lich replied by his orders. The elder waved and said he was off to follow his orders as well. Giju told him that he was entrusting the care of El in his capable hands. The elder commanded the skeletons to bring that hammer and anvil over there into the gate. Then Giju asked Lu what they needed to do next, and Lu told him that first of all, El died because she lost her root. She sacrificed her life to save him, her master, as he was still in critical condition even with Kalian's ability. Then he should restore that root. The root of a holy sword is life, it is the complete opposite to his root, which is death. Lu continued and said that Giju needed to wield the power of life to revive El, and he needs to wield both life and death simultaneously. And of course this won't be easy, since theoretically speaking wielding both life and death is possible. No, even theoretically speaking it's next to impossible. So in other words, he would have to do something close to godly from now. So was he ready to work like a dog? Subscribe to the channel for the next part. Thank you for watching, until next time.